it's a good thing that we come out of radio, because this is exactly what radio is like. You know, those of you from radio, remember all the times you're about to go on the air and something broke and it was impossible to fix, and you got it fixed 2 seconds before. Yep. That's what happened here. So let's show your name.
Yeah, we made it.
Okay, so Troy Lewis is here. Hey, man, David K, voiceover icon. Ron Dewey, great. John Collins in Scotland. Hey, John. Dino Delgado. The way this works is you put a question into the comments field. This is John Records Landecker. My name is Dan O'Day. And ready for this, John? Here we go.
Yeah, let's bring them on.
Okay, now we've got an official label there. By the way, this is what David K said. I used to listen to records on CFTR when I was a kid.
Oh, my God.
One of the reasons you got into radio. Thank you, Dan Michaels. Thank you for letting us know that you can see us and hear us. Okay, we're ready for your questions. If you got a question, put it in the comment field, please. John Dino Delgado says, tell us about your time in Philly.
Well, it was instrumental in my career. I dropped out of Michigan State University during my senior year because I got an offer to go to WIBG in Philadelphia and work for Paul Drew, which was very confining, and my name was Scott Walker.
Now, John, tell us where you were working when you got the offer to go to Philly.
I was enrolled at Michigan State University, and I was working part-time at WILS, Lansing, Michigan. And I got this job offer in the middle of my senior year, and I went to Philadelphia. Drew changed my name to Scott Walker. It was a very tight format. That lasted about a year, maybe, and the station was sold to Storer Broadcasting sold it to Buckley. Rick Buckley came in along with Joey Reynolds, changed everything. The next night, I went back on the air as John Records Landecker. I was there for about a year and a half, and then got a job offer at WLS. They didn't hire me because of Scott Walker. They hired me because of what the personality version of John Records Landecker on WIBG was, and that was pretty much wide open.
If someone was listening to you when you were in Philly, what kind of show would they have heard? What kind of personality?
Well, the Scott Walker show was a Drake format. It's pure and simple. Whatever that means to anybody. I'm not going to explain it. Then it went to basically 100% personality. Whatever you wanted to do, you did. Whatever you wanted to play, you played. And I followed Joey Reynolds on the air, who I've found to be one of the most creative radio personalities I'd ever seen or heard. And therefore, that sort of spurred me to expand the consciousness of my bits, for instance. Mm-hmm. Our major competition was WFIL. And one night there was a lunar eclipse. And so as a bit, I proceeded to do WIBG is now going to totally eclipse WFIL, and it was set up with crowd noise and all sorts of bells and whistles. But, things like that. I did a show on Wednesday night called Wednesday Night at the Memories and played nothing but oldies. On Sunday night, it was the Rock and Gold Countdown. And that was a simultaneous parallel countdown of Philadelphia's top hits and top requests at the same time.
Okay, that's the single worst name for a show I've ever heard.
No, it's not. In fact, I think Rock and Gold is a great name for a format. Of course, that was 1972, or 1969, and I'm allowed to change my mind.
Okay, Dan Michaels has a question. And the question is, has John been to Superdog lately?
No, not lately. Superdog is an iconic sort of a northwest side Chicago, as you might expect, hot dog stand, but that doesn't do it justice. Car hops, or car persons, I suppose now. Order, bring it to you, speakers, great food, really high class, ingredients. And if anybody comes to Chicago and the weather's decent, you ought to go up there to Superdog and give it a try. It's good.
Okay. Tony Waitekus, did you understand the massive effect and legendary status of WLS when you were there?
No. Okay. No, not really, to be honest. And I don't think that most of the people I worked with there when it was really, really massive understood that either. Since then, yeah, I do understand it. Marty Greenberg was one of the general managers there, and I really liked him a lot. And we exchanged messages either on Facebook or somewhere else a couple of years ago, and we were commenting on that very fact that we didn't realize how big we were, and that was probably a good thing, ego-wise. And he said, he made an analogy, we were the New York Yankees, meaning perennial winners, but didn't know it. And that's good, because to us, I believe it was more in your face, compete right there in Chicago, do what you got to do. The whole idea of the signal getting out at night and all of that, that was second. I mean, that was way on a back burner. That's not, I was brought.
So that's interesting, the concept. If you guys really had an understanding of the impact you're having in real time, that would have had some effect on you. You know, there's the Heisenberg effect, which says simply studying something changes it. It's on the submolecular level.
But you know, it can go to your head. Everybody knows about that. You know, you become enamored with your own numbers, and you think you're a big deal, and you can walk on water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not only did we not do that, but no one on that staff would tolerate that at anybody else. I mean, I can't even remember anybody trying to pull that stunt.
So we say no one would tolerate it. You mean another jock would call somebody out?
We wouldn't put up with somebody trying to put themselves up on an individual pedestal. We're going to allow that crap to go on. Okay. I've said this many times that the prime directive from all of us who worked at the station at that time was that WLS was a tool for our amusement, and that's it. And if everybody else got into the joke, great. But if they didn't, too bad. And that attitude pretty much sustained us through all of it. We were broadcasting for each other to a certain extent, showing up on each other's shows, having a good time, going out together on weekends, celebrating birthdays, bringing the kids. It was really a cohesive unit. And was I would think we're down in Georgia.
Well, see, I would think that especially on the night show, I would think even though you guys weren't aware of the impact, especially on the night show, you must have heard from jocks, young jocks from around the country saying, "Hey, can I come see your show? I'm in town, you know, for this, and I'd love to see it." Even
that would happen. That would happen occasionally, but it would also happen, you know, like from Michigan and Indiana and Wisconsin and Illinois downstate. There wasn't so much, hey, I'm here. And although I was flown into Memphis for a college radio thing one day. So, you know, aware, yes. Focused on it, no. Totally understand it, no. Not until years later. I want to explain what I'm wearing. Saturday, I forgot the cap, but Saturday afternoon, the 20th.
I just heard this, yeah.
Saturday afternoon, I received a diploma. I graduated from college from Grand Valley State University in Grand Rapids, Allendale, Michigan, the same school that I enrolled in right out of college in 1966. And then things changed. I went away, dropped out of Michigan State, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And to make a long story very short, I received my diploma. And that's what this is. This is my graduation gown. So this is the first stop of the John Landecker graduation cap and gown tour. Although I forgot the cap and I just brought the baseball cap, but I'm planning to go to a lot of places that people take garden gnomes and take pictures of them, like next to the Grand Canyon. That'll be me wearing the cap and gown, and then it'll be published in a book for $1 million in about 18 months.
You might have identified an entire new market for voice actors, you know, doing the voices of garden gnomes.
No.
And now, of course, John.
Wait a minute. I'm pretty sure somebody's got that covered already. Somebody's at home going, wait a minute. I'm the garden gnome.
Now, you and I know.
Oh, my agent. They're talking about somebody else doing the garden gnome.
Okay. Now, you and I know that when you're doing a show, you don't talk personal stuff because you got to focus on the audience. If it weren't for the fact that I have so much respect for our audience and want to honor the tradition of, hey, you don't talk some inside thing. If it weren't for that, I would tell you that yesterday I had lunch with one of your fellow students at Grandview.
Yeah, Grand Valley.
Whatever.
Grand Valley
Grand Valley
University.
Well, it's a wonderful school. I hear
25,000 students.
I hear good things. Rod Schwartz says, greetings from a Chicago expat living in the Pacific Northwest. John, is there any chance you would do a gig at Sirius XM's 60s or 70s channel?
You bet. All they got to do is ask.
Rod, please call Sirius XM.
Wouldn't be clearer than that.
Shane Ray, how did you feel about WLS switching to All Talk?
Well, I was there when it crept in and when it happened, and honestly, it was inevitable. AM radio had exhausted its tenure as a music source of any consequence. And they didn't keep me for the format. They didn't keep me on the format change, but I took it in stride, honestly. It wasn't a shock, and it had come at the end of a very long decade of darkness, let's just put it that way. So it was maybe almost a relief at that time.
A decade of darkness. That should be the title of your next autobiography, by the way.
Well, it is the title of a chapter of the book if you had read it, but no.
Oh, yes. Now I remember because I've read that book many times.
Of course. Now it's coming.
That's why it sounds so familiar.
Of course.
There's no question here, but still, you can ignore the parts about me. This is Ian Wright in Australia. Morning from South Australia, Dan and John. Just a comment. You may not fully appreciate the contribution of both of you, but John, you may not fully appreciate the contribution you made to Australian commercial radio. Many thanks. Still in this business after 48 years. Rich in experience, not in dollars.
Ian Wright, Victor Harbor, Australia. Well, don't they... I'm trying to quickly access my brain, which is not easy.
Why did you just use a Scottish accent to talk about Australia?
South Australia, not just.
Okay. Yes, it does.
No, wait. Isn't Australia the place where they pay big bucks for radio people? Isn't that the place where they got in trouble for making a prank phone call to the hospital when one of the royal babies was born a couple of years ago?
I think that was Australia.
Yeah,
I think that was Australia. That's not the standard Australian broadcast, though. It's not like
I read these morning teams make tons of money down there.
Okay, well, maybe Ian can elucidate us on that.
Whatever
John hears that Australians make tons of money.
Yeah, some do.
Paul Goffy Gough says, "What makes a great communicator?"
If I knew that, I'd tell you. Probably somebody that doesn't worry about it that much. I think if you got to sit down and go X, Y, Z, check this, make this check, make that check. You can do that in a lot of different professions. This is what you do. This is what you do. This is what you do. That doesn't mean that you can go out and do it necessarily. So what makes a great communicator? First of all, I hate to talk like this, but you better define what great communicator means. And then how is that accomplished? And I think it's something that you have or you don't have, quite frankly, and depends on the current societal definition of great communicator, which can change.
John, I don't know about great communicators, but pretty much everyone
communicates.
They already know how to communicate. It seems to me the way you're become an effective communicator is have something to say and genuinely want the other party to hear and understand it.
And listen.
So Paul, probably when you talk to somebody, you don't ask yourself, okay, how should I do this? Let me make some. You just know what you want to communicate.
You would record yourself doing something, I suppose, and listen to your back. And then if you hear yourself going, and like I said, and then like 5 minutes you go, and like I said, and then 5 minutes you go, and like I said, you're doing it wrong. Or if you repeat the same thing over and over and over again, which people will do in normal conversation. If you talk to somebody on the phone, like I said before, as I said just now, or, hey, you already said it. You don't need to say it again. I remember the first time you said it. I mean, little things like that. Nothing drastic.
I agree completely. And like I said, guys, if please feel free to like the video and share it with your radio friends. Dino Delgado.
I did work with Bill Price, who was a great guy. That came to WLS production director. Unfortunately, the statute of limitations has not run out of all the activities that Bill and I were involved in. So that's all I'm legally allowed to say at this point.
Okay.
Except he was really cool.
So Dave Gross says, did you legally change your middle name to Records?
Are we really going to go down that road again?
He asked it, John. Now, if you want to duck that question, then that's up to you.
I want to duck it, but
I want to know the answer because I've actually never heard the answer to this question.
Oh, man. My middle.
Okay.
What is the date today? Wait a minute. The date today is Wednesday, the 5th, 2018. Okay? I first said this on the air probably around 1969 and thought.
You answered the question, you mean?
The Records truly is my middle name. That would be the end of it. Okay, here's the deal. My mother's maiden name is Marjorie Victoria Records, Records. My grandfather was William J. Records of Franklin, Indiana. When I was born, on my birth certificate, my name is John, middle name Records Landecker. And surprisingly enough, there are no quotations or marks around my middle name on my birth certificate, which is sort of weird because that's the way most people spell it. Indicating, of course,
I think you did a pretty good job of answering. But I just want to one more thing though. When did you legally change your middle name to Records?
That's why we love you, Dan, because you've got the questions that are right in there that are important. Now this guy, Dave's going to walk away because of your last comment, thinking that I did legally change it. It never had to be changed because it's been my legal name since I was born.
Did it ever occur to you that your mother's middle name really wasn't Records, that she did that as a joke?
My mother's middle name was Victoria.
I mean, your mother's maiden name.
Well, then that she would have to be in collusion, popular word these days,
right,
with the entire patriarchal side of her family, all my cousins, my grandmother, my grandfather, her brothers and sisters. Had to be a lot of people in on it.
That could be done.
I suppose. But why?
Glenn Pavlovich. So, John, can you see? Apparently you can see these. Oh, great. So I'll just read it out loud for the people who are listening at home. Hi, John. Several years ago, I read your book, Records Truly Is My Middle Name, a real treat. Listening to air checks and YouTube videos of your work is a great reminder of the legendary radio. I appreciate you and your contributions very much. Incidentally, as a resident of Wisconsin, I giggle every time I see the city Peshtigo.
That requires a quick explanation. And, you asked earlier, did we realize how important and how far-reaching WLS was at the time? And I said no. And the opposite, the sort of opposite is true too. Glenn's referring to a time right before WLS went to talk. And our ratings were in the toilet. I didn't think anybody was listening. And I did, I think, 3 to 7 in the afternoon. And at 7 o'clock, WLS was carrying Sally Jesse Raphael's talk show, which was this sort of everybody's wonderful all the time, if I remember correctly, peachy keen, isn't it great? One day I'm driving around the city of Chicago and I come across a side street that's called Peshtigo Court. And I went, Peshtigo? I could be Johnny Peshtigo. So for the last half hour of the show before Sally Jesse Raphael, I became Johnny Peshtigo, the nicest man in the universe, and took phone calls. And if you called, then your last name was Peshtigo. Then, as it turns out, there is a town in Wisconsin named Peshtigo, to which Glenn is referring. Not only is there a town, it is an area that suffered a greater devastation of a fire than the Chicago fire at exactly the same time, but received no publicity. So thank you for giggling every time you see the city Peshtigo. I'm sure they appreciate it too.
Now, I didn't realize, I knew from you that it was a street called Peshtigo. I didn't realize it was Peshtigo Court. We've got a new reality show today on Peshtigo Court, and just whatever crime wave is hitting Peshtigo.
It's a very small, in fact, it runs right in front of a police station. So good luck with that.
There you go. Troy Lewis asks, what's your thoughts on salespeople being on air? I'm all for it. What about you, John? What's your thoughts on salespeople being on air?
Well, I suppose it depends on the size of the market, how much multitasking you're forced to do. But generally, I would say, well, I don't know. I've never even really given it much thought because usually people in sales don't go on the air. Although, see, the problem would be, and you could just see this coming, be conflict of interest. If the sales guy's on the air and he has his own clients and somebody else has their clients, then the temptation to give your client more time is obvious. But if you've got a decent staff, then you shouldn't have to run into that problem. I don't know where it would have to be a really, and I'm not putting this down. I think small market radio is fantastic, but I think that might be where you find it. I'm trying to recall if there were ever any real salespeople on the air wherever I worked, and I don't think so.
Well, Troy, if you could do us a favor, post a comment and clear this up a little, because I actually didn't understand. I pictured salespeople going on the air for some reason, but I didn't know what. Are you saying? Let's flip it. Are you saying, what do you think about jocks who also work as salespeople? Is that what you're saying? Or
sometimes that's what they got to do.
Yeah, no, exactly. So that's why I would appreciate it if Troy would.
Like I said, you wouldn't find that probably in a major or a medium market, but if you were in a small enough market and the staff was small enough and it required that, well, then definitely.
Right. So that's a very different question.
Sure.
And of course, you said you wouldn't find that in a medium or major market. No, the salespeople are too busy writing all the commercial copy for their clients.
Then there's that. But
Troy is saying salespeople with full shows. So I'm still a little bit confused.
Well, he's talking about part of your job is you do a shift and you have to sell. Well, if that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do.
You talk about the possible conflict of interest. If a salesperson's on the air, they'd be tempted to, promote their clients more. The way to get around that is only put really bad salespeople on the air who don't have clients. Right,
which is very helpful to the listener, building a listening audience.
Josh Blake says in the small market where he works, some on-air people happen to have regular shifts, extra income, etc., close to lacrosse.
That's very cool. I think it's great. Don't get me wrong. If that's what it takes to maintain a radio station on the air, then that's what you got to do. I do it. I mean, the little station, the station I work for here in Michigan City once a week. I don't really work for them. We have our own company and everything, but they have guys on the air that go out and have their own clients to subsidize their income, and that's fabulous. I mean, it doesn't hurt either, really, if you have one-on-one communication between an air personality and a client. How many times has a salesperson come to me over the years and go, will you come with me on a sales call? So sure, that can't hurt to have that extra bond, especially in towns where, you don't have ratings, right? There's a lot of markets that don't have ratings. So you sort of got to live by the seat of your pants, and you got to do whatever you got to do. And if that's it, that's it. And good. And I'm glad people are that dedicated to broadcasting and can do that. That's great.
So if you got a question for John Records Landecker, John is the one underneath whose face it says John Landecker. And I'm Dan O'Day, and I'm the one who underneath my face it says Dan O'Day.
Hold on. I'm going to lip sync something for you now.
Sure. Never mind what I was saying.
Ready? Okay. You know the Arbor song Graduation Day?
Yes.
Let's see.
No, you know what? I don't.
Hold on. We go. It's a time for joy, a time for tears, very much, everybody.
Wow, that's I've got to say, you don't get to see that level of entertainment these days. If we ever do another one of these, we should have you sing it live, but we'll use auto tune. So. Yep.
Man.
Yep. Hold on.
There. Oof.
Yep.
Okay.
I disappeared. I believe in telling the truth. I mean, I always tell the truth. So I'll just tell what happened. Watching John lip sync, I had to go throw up is what happened. And so I turned off the camera because I didn't want to subject you guys to that. And I'm sorry if in hindsight, I should have done it on camera, and I'm sorry.
That'd have been much better, yeah.
So let's see. Tony Waitekus from Illinois.
Were the WLS Jacks friends with WCFL Jacks, or were they hated? I would say they were never hated. There was also numerous times that Jocks would go back and forth. Larry Lujack worked at both WLS and WCFL. Dick Biondi worked at both places. Chuck Knapp worked at both places. There was not hatred ever. There was competition, definitely. And competition breeds higher quality broadcasting, if you ask me. And so come to think of it, that's one of the big downsides of consolidation, is that not only are individual competitors suddenly combined under one corporate roof, all the people that they had employed using their talents to promote are no longer there, and there's no money, and the competition, and I think the results speak for themselves as far as competitive radio. Are there markets where there are head-to-head competitors anymore? I don't know. There was in Philadelphia. It was WIBG and WFIL. In Chicago, it was WCFL and WLS, and that made it a lot of fun.
Well, it is odd these days with voice tracking, because there must be instances in which someone is voice tracking two shows, two different stations, same company, same market, airs at the same time. So that person's competing against himself or herself.
Yeah.
And probably hates that person too.
Yeah, right.
Brad Howard says, what was your favorite show on WLS beside your own?
Oh, I don't have an answer for that without each. Oh, man.
Okay, I know you want to be diplomatic.
I don't really think I did have one. Each one had its own peculiarities. J.J. Jeffries' show had the most inside stuff that would tap into things that nobody other than the air staff would understand. So that was a lot of fun. Larry was always a lot of fun. Bob Surratt was great. Von Daniels, Jeff Davis, Steve King. I'll tell you, though, one of my favorite all-time radio personalities was at WCFL, and that was Ron Britton. And I'm talking about Ron Britton through the mid-'60s was, to me, I've never heard anything better in my life as far as being a top 40 air personality. It was insane. And I've never heard anything like it before or since, not even close.
Just to give us an idea of what you mean, can you think of an example of the type of thing that JJ would do on his show that was inside stuff? Either a real thing or just make up an example?
Well, if you use the term TTFO'd, you know what that means, right?
I don't.
Thrown the f*** out.
So say it again more slowly so we can all make notes. Okay.
Also a WA, weak anecdote. Could be current. You see what I'm saying? You're laughing. You didn't even hear it.
A WA.
SA, that'd be a strong anecdote. And he was the easiest person to crack up. The easiest person.
Are we still talking JJ?
Huh? JJ.
Are we still? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it was cackling hysteria. It was fantastic. So in that regard, I liked his show a lot. But then, Bob and I would show up on each other's shows, and we had a blast. I just thought the whole station was great. I mean, I really didn't have what you would call a favorite on the staff. And I've had few favorites over the years. When I was really young and listened to WXYZ in Detroit, there was a guy named Joel Sebastian and another guy named Lee Allen, who I thought
that fits right into Troy Lewis's question. Look what Troy asked.
Well, here we go, Troy. First of all, I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and at that time, Ann Arbor actually had 2 top 40 radio stations. On one station, there was a guy named Dave Pringle, who went on to be Dave Prince at CKLW, or was it WXYZ? Anyway, I forget. I think WXYZ. WXYZ. Then there was WHRV, which is now Wham Radio, and they had a guy named Ollie McLaughlin, who was an African-American jock who went on to produce the Capitals and a bunch of other stuff called Cool Jerk. And I listened to those guys all the time. And then I discovered Detroit radio, and my favorite station there was WXYZ, and that had Lee Allen and Joel Sebastian. Eventually, I listened to a bit of CKLW when it was a big Drake station, but honestly, I never liked that format as much as the WXYZ format that I was talking about. Those 2 guys were very influential in me wanting to be in radio, at least as far as I listened to when I was a kid.
Do you recall the first radio personality who made an impression on you as a kid? Just because radio was always there and always on. Do you recall the one person who?
I think that the first show that made any impression on me at all was something called Big John and Sparky, which was a mid-50s, was a kids radio program. And in the last year, I went back and I found some recordings. It's horrible. It was just the worst show I'd ever heard in my life. And how it would be that this communicated to me as a kid, I don't know.
They're both here watching this video.
Sparky here online.
Yeah.
Hi guys.
Yeah. Nice going. What was it that grabbed you as a kid when you heard the show?
Theater of the mind had to be, imagination, which is what, of course, radio was and can still be today. Then the local guy, there was also another local guy named Ted Heisel, who gave me my first radio job. And then Tom O'Brien, who was a air personality on that little station there, and then got me a job in Flint. I listened to both of those guys a lot. Ted was an unbelievable learning experience. He would take me with him on day-long remotes in Ann Arbor during the Art Fair Bargain Days, which happens in the middle of July, and it goes throughout the city on Main Street, up State Street to South U. And Ted would do remotes every day, starting on Main Street, going to State, and then over to South U, and I'd go along every single day doing remotes. And it was amazing.
How many days was the festival?
It would go like, I think 10 days, maybe a week. Wow. It was a good chunk. And there were a lot of people in town. There was bargain days and, all sorts of activity. And I think it's even bigger now, quite frankly. But man, that was something else.
Well, you're unusual in that respect, in that I believe to this day, you enjoy remotes.
Oh, I love them.
So many jobs, not all, but so many jobs.
Last week.
You got one next week?
No, I did one last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from Bozak Honda.
Do they have any specials that weekend?
It was their anniversary as a dealership.
Oh, I'll be there. They're the ones who are family owned and operated,
Yes,
aren't they?
yes,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
are.
yeah. I've heard of them.
Catch on
Uh,
there in California.
so why? Because I think it's fair to say most jocks don't like doing remotes. What is it about remotes that you like?
Spontaneity of it, the unscripted part of it, interaction with people. I don't like working alone. I can't stand it. I like being part of a team, or group where there's a little energy going on, where you can react to other things. Not everything has to be generated from you. You don't have to carry the entire burden, so to speak. I mean, you do in the sense that you're running the show, but you're not in the sense that everything has to be trapped within your own mind. Something you see, you want to use, some other person, whatever, it's there. It's always, no guarantee, but I like the immediacy of it. I like being local. It's just way more fun than sitting around in a studio by yourself, I think.
And
WLS in the heyday did remotes from Great America, a theme park. We flew the whole station out there, literally. Control room, board, carts, mics, the whole 9 yards, engineers. I did shows from there regularly with probably thousands of teenagers surrounded around this gazebo in what they called, I think it was Hometown Square. Also, a lot of stations in Chicago used to do remotes from the Taste of Chicago or Chicago Fest. I still think they do, although it's gotten so large and the stations have gotten so homogenized that I don't think it makes much difference anymore. But in the beginning, it did, and it was fun.
Did you ever do a remote at a Taste of Peshtigo?
I don't believe they have one, but if they did, I would. I'll tell you one great contest I did at a remote from the Taste of Chicago. I was doing nights, and this is pretty close to when WLS was going to go to talk, and here's why. Throngs of people, throngs, okay? To get from one side to the other, was like a minefield. So the contest was that I was going to go over to the beer tent on a remote mic. I was going to get a beer. And then I was going to walk back to to our remote wagon. And the caller with the closest time, the amount of time that it took me to get across from one point to the other, won a prize. There you go. Now, where else can you get entertainment like that? And it was then, of course, live. You know what I'm saying? Oh, we did live concerts. Wait, hold it. We did live concerts, too, from Alpine Valley. Back in the heavy Kansas, Doobie Brothers, REO Speedwagon. Big.
And just a last comment on the idea of remotes, because so many jocks really dislike them. It might help to keep in mind, like you said, you use the people, you would talk to the people there and put them on the air. Even if for a jock, if that was a gig that you had to do because none of the other jocks would do it, that person that you put on the air, they remember that to this day. For their entire life, they remember the time they went on the radio.
Well, I understand from some personalities that I've heard. I think Bobby Bones is one example. Some of the people that are on his show started out as listeners or something that they met, or just was a person off the street. They weren't professionally trained, which was an advantage, and therefore became more natural. I think that there's quite a few examples of that around. As a matter of fact, I can't quote chapter and verse, but the idea that you would ignore meeting the public is sort of counterproductive to what your goal is.
Gary Burbank kind of used his listeners as his audience as a farm system for finding writers for the show, because they would gravitate toward the show. They'd send him in stuff, and the people who consistently sent him in funny stuff, he'd say, "We want to hire you for the show." Dan Michaels?
Yes. How did I end up doing April Fool's Day on WXRT? Got to do a little backstory. This is like in the 70s, and WXRT is like the hippest radio station in town, and WLS is not. We're an AM station. Now, how it came to be that I would go there on April Fool's Day, I'm not sure. But I did, and I had a great time, and it was a complete here comes, play what you want, play theme sets, try to prove that you are more than the Osmonds or whatever. And it went over well. I did it a couple of times. I got in a little trouble once because I posed with Bobby Scafish, another great air personality in Chicago, wearing a WXRT shirt. And WLS didn't like it that much. But what are you gonna do? It's April Fool's Day.
Boy, you were a renegade.
Oh,
wearing the wrong T-shirt.
Oh,
man.
boy.
Any last question?
Let's go to our next caller. Oh, wait a minute. We don't have another caller. I'm sorry.
Well, okay. Well, in radio terms, then what you say is, well, I think there's room for one more comment.
We have a line open. I believe we have a line open.
I think
one line open.
Henry, is there a line open? Yes. So Scott says.
Yes, I did. Yes, Scott. Thanks for asking that question. Here it comes. This is a bit that lasted 25 years. Back in the heyday of WLS, I was the night jock. I wanted to play rock and roll music. I was responsible for the teen audience. Debbie Boone's "You Light Up My Life" was a huge hit. It was in heavy rotation. One night I went on the air and said, on the air live, I didn't like the record, but I realized that some people did. So what I was going to do was play it in installments. And I'm going to play you 15 seconds of Debbie Boone, "You Light Up My Life" now. In a half hour, I'm playing another 15 seconds, and so on until at the very end of the show, the final 15 seconds of Debbie Boone would play. In the beginning of this explanation, John Guerin, the program director, came into the studio live, and we discussed this on the air. And my memory of it is that I convinced him that the possibility existed that someone would stick around those entire 4 hours to see if I actually did it. And he said, okay. And I did. Jump ahead, I don't know, the 30th year of "You Light Up My Life" or some anniversary. And I'm working the oldies station, WGMK in Chicago, doing mornings. And we decided to take a year to play the Debbie Boone song. So we were going to play a section every month. And we did get a hold of Debbie Boone. And Debbie Boone came out at the very end and was a really good sport. There was nothing vicious about it. And it was fun. Yeah. So I did tell, not only did I tell Debbie Boone about it, she participated in the conclusion.
So that gentleman there is John Records Landecker. Let me see if I can have one last deeply meaningful question for you.
Mm-hmm. Uh-oh. That means we're not going to get a deeply meaningful question.
No, I got nothing. So, John, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks.
I'm going to leave the final words, the parting words.
All right.
John Records Landecker. Whatever you say will be the last words of the broadcast.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.